Hey, welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. This is your host, Una Duncan, and holy moly, dude, I can't wait for you to hear this interview, especially if you are a mom who feels like your freaking brain is going to melt because you have like a million mental tabs open. And when it comes to household management, if your family is open to helping around the house, and let's face it, that's kind of an if, at the end of the day, if the shit is going to get done, it's because you made it happen. My guest today is Sam Kelly, and she is going to help you change that. She is a feminist coach for mothers who helps you share the mental load of keeping house with the whole family. And you know what's funny? If you had asked me before this interview if this is a big problem for me, I probably would have said no. But I found myself kind of getting emotional during this interview when I imagined not having to micromanage my kids to help out around the house. Oh, and by the way, we don't ask them to help anymore. You're also going to hear how to get your partner to start taking the mental load without you nagging them. You're going to learn how to get your kids to start noticing what needs to be done and taking care of household chores totally on their own, and why you might want to ditch the chore chart. Because it's not about who unloads the dishwasher. It's about breaking generational cycles of women doing unpaid mental labor. You gotta check this out.
It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're gonna want to turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
Sam Kelly, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's get right into it. Can you describe exactly what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I call myself a feminist coach for mothers. And what we're doing is essentially empowering kids to be proactive contributors in the home without relying on mom or dad, usually mom, to give them assignments, write out a to-do list, oversee whether or not they've done it. They are taking the initiative. They're doing household tasks on their own without waiting to be asked.
God, I'm like drooling hearing about that. Oh my God, I'm like, come to mama. Okay, but tell me more about you. Like, what was there a moment in your life when you were like, okay, this is crushing me. I need help. Was this from your own experience that you decided that this is something you need doing?
Absolutely. Yes, there was a moment. So about 2 years ago, was when shit hit the fan and I could no longer sustain carrying the vast majority of my family's mental load on my own. And that's when I broke down and finally started to go on the journey with my husband of becoming a more equitable partner, which essentially looked like me teaching him how to notice for himself what needed to be done and then do it without saying, just give me a list or just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And the fact that women are the ones that have to do that is like a whole other discussion to have, but it sucked and I hated it and it's not right. But this is what we are changing for our kids. So we went on our own journey, hard, long journey, but we are doing so much better. We've made a ton of progress. So at that point, we've been working on it, really, really focused, intentional effort for about a year together. It's a Friday night. I am making a Saturday morning to-do list for my kids. And I just had this huge light bulb moment and I like dropped the red magic marker to the floor. And I'm just like, what am I doing? I just spent the last year of my life essentially teaching my husband how to not rely on me. Right. Why am I now teaching my kids to rely on me to give them assignments before they do anything in the home? And that's when I decided we're done with this. We're not doing this anymore. We are not perpetuating this narrative that it is my job as the woman and the mother to dole out assignments to everyone. And only then will people actually contribute sometimes. But we are instead going to switch we're going to switch the entire way of doing this. And we're going to go from the chore chart to what I now call notice and do. So we're teaching them how to notice for themselves what needs to happen and then do it. So we're taking that load off of the mother and they're carrying in age appropriate ways their own share of the mental load.
Wow, Sam, I am so caught up in this that it didn't even occur to me that there is another way You know what I mean? Like, I feel that I really am the only one who knows what to do, which is so ridiculous. And I feel like, yes, I have to boss my minions around to get this done. Why do you think that is? Why do you think women are the ones who are like, I'll tell you guys what needs doing here? Why is that?
Yeah,
turned out
well,
like that?
that's a great question. And it totally makes sense that it doesn't occur to anyone to do it any other way. And in my mind, it's not ridiculous. Like I said, it totally makes sense because the culture that we live in is such that we are fed the lie that it is the woman's job to be in charge of everything within the home. And the man goes out and he works. It's like we're kind of living in this like 1950s like stew, and it's the air that we breathe still. And it takes so much to claw yourself out of that when it's literally the air that we are breathing every single day. So not only are we experiencing the kind of the default expectation where we are the default for everything, but we're also fed all of these like good mom lies, I call them, that says good moms take care of the home. Good moms do everything. Good moms provide this and this and this and this and this. And if you can't do it, if you cannot meet these wildly unrealistic expectations, then you're a bad mom. And so it's really like we've been set up to play this game that's rigged against us where we can never win, right? And even I would say it goes as far as like, if we are, if we are organized and we keep a clean home, then we're perpetuating quote unquote a toxic Pinterest culture. But if we aren't organized and our home is a little bit more chaotic or messy or whatever, then we don't have our shit together and we're neglecting our kids or not providing a healthy home space or whatever it is. So it's like no matter what we do, we can't win. And as soon as we realize that these messages are basically like patriarchal conditioning that's keeping us down because we're so busy trying to just like tread water. Yeah. So we're so exhausted that we can't make any shifts. We can't make any changes because just maintaining the status quo is all consuming.
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny as you're talking, I'm thinking about individuals in my life that I love who are so struggling with keeping a house that looks organized and all of those things. And I think their go-to now is they're like, well, what's wrong with me? Am I depressed? Do I have ADHD? Why can't I manage this? And I'm a little like listening to you and I'm like, well, it's also just really fucking hard. Like maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe this is just an unbelievably ridiculous thing that we're expected to do.
Yeah, maybe this is so much more work that was never meant to be shouldered by one person. And maybe what we need is support.
Yeah. Well, and also to be fair, I mean, I think that there is an expectation that male partners are helping and stuff, but I guess what hasn't quite translated is, but I don't want to have to tell you to do that. Or I don't even want to have to make the list of things for you to do.
Yes. Well, and even just that word help is very, very interesting, right? Because when we say like, oh, like a male partner needs to quote unquote help. Yeah. The kind of subtext there is that it's our job. Right. We have ownership over it actually. And everyone else is just kind of pitching in and helping. Oh. But ultimately the responsibility is on us. And so when people don't quote unquote help, it all falls to us to pick up the pieces, because if we don't pick up the pieces, no one else will.
Yeah, I never heard it before. It's kind of like, you know, I hear it when they're like, oh, look at him babysitting his children. I'm like, he's not babysitting, he's the dad.
He's parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, he's parenting as our parents. But I've never heard it with, hey, can you help me clean up the kitchen? Can you help me? Right. I'm owning it. This is my job. And you're just a little sidekick. And aren't you a big helper? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I told my audience I was going to talk to you. And here was the first question that somebody wanted me to ask you, which is kind of the biggie. How to get family members on board with tidying, cleaning, chores when they all seem to have ADD, plus a freakishly high degree of tolerance for clutter and near blindness to filth. And you're super busy because you work all the time, so you can't be everyone's mom asking for a friend.
Okay, love this so much. So the secret to what I do is in the simplicity. We are a neurodivergent family. I'm undiagnosed neurodivergent. So I totally understand the overwhelm. And it's At the end of the day, if something is the biggest, like game-changing, life-changing strategy, if it is not realistic for my normal life and like practical, I'm not going to do it. So it has to make sense for me. So the magic is in the simplicity. So we start by setting expectations and saying, this is what we are doing. And it doesn't have to be a huge lecture, but we just sit down with our kids, husband, and say, we are going from this to this. I am not in charge of everything. This is like everyone lives here. This is a whole family team effort. So we are going to work together. And I have a whole, a free guide that details everything of how to do this. And it basically involves 3 steps. The first 2 steps are really, really simple and easy to implement. And then the third step I have on my audio course, but you could see huge progress just in the first 2 steps alone. So first thing is that you want to establish what I call the big 3. The big 3 are 3 daily tasks that the kids can have ownership over, and they are expected to complete every day. So for example, my 3 kids every day make their bed. Every day they check for themselves to see if the dishwasher needs to be unloaded, and then they work to unload it together. And the third one is that they manage their laundry on their own. And I've walked them through the process of how to do that. But that could be as simple as like you put out the laundry, dirty laundry, or clean laundry for them. They fold it and put it away. They don't have to start by managing it, the whole thing. So anyways, you want to keep it realistic for them at the level that they're at, manageable, and have it feel like, okay, like this isn't so hard. Like if you're going to start lifting weights for the first time, you're not going to, start with like 20, 50 pounders. You're going to start with like the 5. Like, okay, I can do this. And then you build up and add more on. So the big 3 can be whatever you want. I tell people to think about what are 3 things that you feel like is realistic for your kids to do every day that you just genuinely want off of your plate, that you don't want to have to worry about anymore, that they can manage. And then they practice doing that every day. The cool thing about the big 3 is that's where they learn cleaning skills. So if we want our kids to be able to proactively clean the house, we have to teach them actually how to clean. So that's why I have them like empty the dishwasher. I want them to learn how to empty a dishwasher, and that it's really easy to do. Laundry, I want them to learn the skill of folding, put away clothes, sorting, whatever it is. And then making their bed, same thing. I want them, that to me feels like a healthy habit. I want them to learn how to do that every day on their own. So that is number 1, the big 3. Okay. Then on top of the big 3, we're going to have them do 1 notice and do of their choosing. And the notice and do can be anything they choose to do. And it's really important to understand, though, just because we are like pro noticers, because we are the ones that have been tasked, right, by default to notice everything for everyone in the home constantly. But just because we know how to do it doesn't mean our kids do. But it's a teachable skill that we can teach them. The easiest way to do that is to start by taking them on a little walk around the house and say, here are some examples of things you can notice. You want to kind of look down on the floor, like, okay, so we're in the living room. Let's look on the floor and see if there's any trash or toys left on the floor. Let's look on the chairs. Is there anything that's thrown over the side of a chair? We could even look at the coffee table. Let me show you how to see, like, if it's really, really dusty. You can run your finger on it. You can get down on the level. You can see, like, here's the duster. Let me show you where the duster is. And this is where you can clean off the coffee table, just so they start having ideas of different things that they can notice. So that is the easiest way to get started. Every day they do their big 3 and 1 notice and do of their choosing. And in terms of a busy family, like we are all so busy. The way that we make sure that it gets done is that we have to prioritize it. Like there isn't a little time fairy that flies around and says, oh, here's an extra pocket of time for you to do this. So in the same way that we prioritize sports or, play rehearsal or school or homework or anything else, we're prioritizing family contributions. So I use what's called pre-existing motivators to do the heavy lifting for me. So I say, okay, you understand that the expectation is your daily big 3 and your like 1 notice and do of your choosing, whatever that is. You need to make sure to get that done. You get to choose when you do it, but it has to be done before you go to any kind of extracurricular activity, practice, playing with friends, screen time, anything that they are already doing in their life that they care about. We're prioritizing the family work first so they get it done first.
Mhm.
And I think that's also a really, really important skill to have, of how to prioritize, like keeping a space clean and taking care of these things within the context of a busy life. Because there's no point in time in which life, you know what I mean? Like we're all waiting for life to settle down. It'll never
It's
settle
not gonna.
down.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So to give them the skill of this is how you manage things, even amidst being busy and chaos and going from one place to another, this is how you make time for it and prioritize it.
Oh, okay. Let me run through that so I can make sure I've got it. So
Absolutely.
So I teach my kids. So with all together, we're going to identify three things. The non-negotiables, the three big things. So my house, I might be like vacuuming, emptying the dishwasher for sure, and getting the firewood or whatever. Right? So the three things. And then I teach them how to do it. I'm like, this is what I mean this is what emptying the dishwasher looks like when it's done. You're not just gonna leave everything on the counter. It's gonna like whatever. So I teach them how to do it. And then I would say, and then I also want you to do one notice and do. And so here are some examples. Walk them through the house. Here are some examples of things that I see, one notice and do. And so then with my kids, and I say, and this happens before the screen time, before play dates, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So then is there a chart or something where they'd say like, look, mom, I did the notice and do. Have I picked up my sweater off the kitchen floor or whatever?
Great question. Yeah. So especially in the beginning, and especially with neurodivergent families, having visual reminders or visual cues is so helpful. So especially like as we're still learning, we don't have it anymore, but in the very beginning, we got just like a simple, doesn't have to be elaborate, doesn't have to be a big deal, just like a piece of computer paper. And we did it together, just took 5 minutes. I wrote at the top, big three, and I wrote what they were, and I drew a super simple little picture. So my youngest, because he couldn't read yet, see what they were. And then they also, I wasn't planning on it happening this way, but they all kind of added their own special thing. And my oldest wrote notice and do at the bottom. So they had that visual reminder of the big three, what each of those tasks were, and then to do the notice and do. And then I tell them, when you're done with it, come back and tell me what you did. So they kind of report back. So we're again reinforcing and teaching the skill of communication within a family.
Yeah.
So we all are on the same level. We all are aware and know what's going on. So for example, it will look like my kid will come up and say, okay, I'm going to go to so-and-so's house to play, like one of my older kids. And I'll say, awesome. What did you do? And they'll say, okay, I made my bed. The laundry, probably a load needs to be started tomorrow. So I'll start a load tomorrow. Did my dishes. And for my freebie, I took out some garbages. Cool. Go ahead. You're great. And the cool thing with the notice and do is that once they learn the skill of how to notice, then you can give them really simple cues like, hey, I don't know why I keep saying living room as an example, but like dining room or kitchen. The kitchen is kind of trash, guys. Can you guys go notice some things real quick? And then they have that capability to really quickly choose for themselves what they want to notice and contribute and put away without me having to do all the mental work of saying, so-and-so, can you put away this and this and this, and this is where it goes, and this is how you do it. Okay, next child, this and this. Like, all I have to do is just say, can you guys go notice?
Yes.
And it just takes so much mental and cognitive work off of you.
It's because really it's the micromanaging of it that makes so many people be like, oh God, forget it. I'll just do it. I can't, like, it's so much less effort for me to do it than for me to stand there and be like, okay, no, keep doing it. No, now this stage, now do this. And like, that's the part that just drives you crazy. Okay. So my next question for you, Sam, is, when you're describing this, I'm picturing younger kids, and what I have is I've got a 12 and 14-year-old boys and our family has a history of chore charts and nagging. So how do I back up from that culture and start to implement something like this with kids that are older and have the chore chart mentality?
For sure. So my oldest is 12 now. Okay. And when we started, she was 10. So we had been doing various levels of the chore chart for about a decade, mostly not just because, like you said, it felt easier for me to just do it on my own
for sure.
most of the time. So honestly, it's the exact same process, no matter the kids' ages, which is one of the things that makes this so great, is that you don't have to go find all new strategies for different ages. So like I have people in my DMs with like an 18-month-old all the way to like 18 years old, even like older kids who are adults who are still living at home are using these strategies. I just had a dad actually share a reel that I reshared to my stories yesterday saying, I have been doing this with my daughter, been working really, really well. And I just thought, if this works for my daughter, it could work for me too. And he's been doing the exact same strategies for himself as well as a full adult.
Yeah.
So I would say for your situation with boys, you also get to have really cool conversations. I mean, as I have two daughters and I have a boy too. And so regardless of like gender, you can still have this conversation, but I think you're in a unique position with teenage boys where you get to talk about these things, maybe on a little bit more of a deeper level and say, hey guys, I want you to know, this is why we are changing it, because there's this thing called burnout. And burnout happens when one person, like a basketball team, if one person is in charge of all the playmaking, all the shooting, all the passing, all the defense, all the offense, then, and the whole team doesn't contribute, that one basketball player is going to get really, really tired really, really quickly. And that's not how a team works. So we are a full family team, and I want you guys to be there with me, doing the playmaking, doing the passing, doing the shooting. This is how we're going to do that. So instead of me saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, like the basketball player who's doing everything, we are instead going to shift to this team effort. And you guys get to choose how you contribute. And you get to, and it's called noticing. And when you can notice things, then it takes some of that work off of my shoulders. And now we're sharing the work all together. And a part of the noticing is we're also going to do like practice, like a basketball player shows up to practice every day and does their drills. That's what the big three is. The big three is the daily practice every day. So you can start growing these muscles. So then when you are an adult, these things that take, like when adults aren't taught these things as kids, there's so many people in my DMs every day saying, I wish I would have been taught this as a child, because trying to retrain your brain as an adult is actually really hard, and I'm drowning in my life. But if you can learn these basic, like drills, these basic skills as a kid, it's going to be so easy for you to, as an adult, make a layup. It's going to be so easy for you to make a 3-pointer because you practice, whereas everyone else is just like missing again and again and again, and it's exhausting. So that's kind of how I would frame it for boys. And
dude,
then
that speech is so good.
like, you do it. We set the expectation. This is how we're doing it. And I will say too, like, it's so normal for kids, especially when you're changing things up from what they're used to. It's so normal for them to be like, oh, what? I don't want, come on. It's okay. It's okay. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. They're kids. That's fine. That's normal. We're just going to move through it. And it won't last forever. And then once they understand the expectation and the boundaries, then it just becomes part of your normal routine.
Okay. So actually, I think if I introduce this to my kids, they'd be like, sweet, because it would seem like less work than they're doing now. So that's one thing, little resistance I have is like their chore chart. They've got like 12 chores they got to do before and that's how micromanaged it is. It's like, you've got to do your homework, then you have to make your bed, then you have to feed the chickens. I've got like check. So, with older kids who have more capacity, maybe, do you just chunk it bigger? Like make one of the big three clean the kitchen versus micromanaging it into dishwasher? Okay.
Yeah, it's super flexible and customizable to whatever like your kids are comfortable with and able to handle. Could absolutely say clean the kitchen, but they would have to understand what that means. So you have to walk them through. This is the standard. This is the expectation. In the same way that you would, like, if you're teaching them how to tie their shoes, show them how to tie their shoes. And then understand that it's a process, right? And it's okay for it to be a learning process. But yeah, you could totally chunk bigger things. If that's something, if that's the level that they're at. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. And then another question from my community, they said, how can I start letting go as they mature and start creating boundaries for myself? So probably similar to what I said, like, how do you shift that responsibility a little bit more as they get older?
I would say bring yourself back again and again and again. And I'm guessing what this person is getting at is like, how do I stop myself from doing it and
Yeah,
give them the
probably.
reins, give them the reins more, right? Yeah. Keep in mind that this is so much more than just getting the dishes done. This is so much more than just having the laundry folded and put away. At the core of this, what we are doing is we're not only teaching life skills that are like executive functioning skills are like not like one of, it's the biggest predictor for success in life. So we're teaching them massively important life skills that are not just nice to have, but crucial and that have ripple effects in so many different ways. And also we're breaking the cycle of motherhood burnout and inequitable partnership. Because when we teach our sons that they are just as capable of sharing the mental load of managing a household as their mom and their sisters, and that is the expectation that they carry their fair share and that they contribute proactively on their own. And we teach our daughters that it is not their job to just by default do everything for everyone, and that is a toxic, unrealistic standard, and to not expect to do that in the future for themselves. That's how we break this cycle of so that in the situation that so many of us find ourselves in, where we're like, we didn't want this, we didn't ask for this, but here we are.
Yeah.
And now we get the chance to like kind of take this crappy situation that so many of us find ourselves in, spin it into gold for our kids, and to actually change things, because it's not going to change unless we confront it head on and say, this is not okay. This is how we want to be. This is how we teach kids differently.
I love it. When you told your story, it started with the conversation with your partner. So if you're feeling like that's where you need to be, is it the same process? Would you say to your partner, let's talk about 3 big things. Let's talk about some notice and do, or I mean, that seems a little condescending.
No, that's a great question. Teaching children and teaching an adult partner are 2 very, very different things, 2 very different processes. Okay. So, what I've seen happen again and again is especially women who take the audio course, they listen to it. I will get so many people emailing me saying, okay, I'm only 1 lesson into it. It's a 5-lesson audio course. I'm only 1 lesson into this. I want my husband to listen to this with me. So husband will listen to it. They'll implement the strategies together, like, link arm in arm in tandem with their kids. And then just by default, the husband is like, okay, I get it. We're teaching the kids, but it's just naturally soaking into him as well. But yeah, having these conversations with my husband, a lot of them were really, really hard. A lot, like really hard. And we had to just keep coming back to it again and again and again, because for how much these patriarchal conditionings are steeped into us, they're equally steeped into the men as well. Sure. They just show up in different ways, and it takes a long time to root that out. So yeah, it's different, but men can absolutely work together with women to teach their children and to show them how to, do these things.
I have to confess that in my partnership, although I am the person who is most likely to make a okay to-do list and like kind of crack the whip on that, I am the partner with the lower standards when it comes to household stuff. So I actually don't notice a lot of the stuff that my husband will be like, did you clean the kitchen? I'll be like, yep, looks good. And he's like, okay, no, come and look. This isn't done. And I literally don't see it. And to be honest, when he points it out, I'm a bit shrugged. Like, I don't really care. Like, these are his standards. So, I'm wondering if other messier partners feel that way. And what could if a woman's listening to this and her husband's like, shrug, I don't care if the kitchen's clean like that. How can she work with him so that they're working towards the same standard without there being a big conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a concept called the minimum standard of care. For kids especially, I simplify it and call it a reset. So like, what does a reset kitchen look like? It's really important to be clear and communicate instead of just operating off of assumptions of, well, this is my standard. And obviously everyone's going to have the same standard and it's fine. It often doesn't work that way. In terms of, and I just want to be clear too with the distinction, in terms of kids, like you as the parent get to decide this is the standard. You are the leader. You are the teacher. It's not like a whole discussion that we're having about the standard. You get to, right? You get to lead out and say, this is how you do it from beginning to end. And that's great. With a partner, if your standards are vastly different, that's when you need to come together, talk about it, and see if you can find like a happy medium, especially if you're operating from opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think it's really important too, especially when I think it's easy for men to be like, I just don't care as much as you do. like calm down. Why are you so anxious? Which is very problematic. Because there are reasons, right? There are reasons why we're doing things a certain way. And it's easy to say, I just don't care when you aren't the one, like we talked about before, tasked with picking up all the pieces by default, right? Like I don't actually care more about the kitchen, but what I care about is having a kitchen that functions at a certain level to make my life easier, you know?
Yeah.
So, having that conversation, especially with an adult partner, where it's like, well, there's reasons why having a clear kitchen counter makes life easier, makes things more efficient. Like if I'm going to go make dinner, or you're going to go make dinner, or whatever, and it's trashed, then it makes it a lot harder. I don't want to make my life harder. So let's figure out how to make this as easy as possible for everyone involved, because quote unquote, not caring is a privilege, right?
Ooh.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege for the person who is not the default. And the goal is to make things easier for everyone, not just the person who has the privilege of not caring. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I'm drinking that in, Sam. I'm taking it. Okay. Tell me about incentives and consequences. Like, what if you have a family member who just flat out refuses to do this?
So you could handle that a few different ways. One, you could get curious about it and you could say, okay, so like what's actually going on here? Are they missing some of the skills? Does it feel overwhelming to them? Even though what I'm asking them feels manageable to me, does it actually for some reason feel overwhelming to them? And what I like to say, especially with my most resistant kid, who's very, very strong-willed and will often look at me and be like, no, and just walk away, you know, is like, hey, okay, so like, tell me what's going on. Like, I'll say, what feels hard about this to you? What feels hard? And sometimes he'll give me an answer, sometimes he won't. But in the past, he said things like, it just takes so much time and I don't want to have to do it. Or I can't remember other ones, but like time has been an issue before. And because of his neurodivergence, right, there's time blindness. So things he can't like estimate how long things will actually take in reality, or he has a hard time doing that.
Right.
So in those instances, then it's really easy to like gamify it. Like, okay, yeah, let's see how long it actually takes. I'm going to start counting and you hurry and do it. And let's see what number I get to. Or I'm going to turn on a song and any song you want. Let's see if you can finish it in the time that the song is done. So then they start to see that it's actually manageable for them. The other thing that you can do, like we talked about before with the pre-existing motivators, is like, okay, you don't want to do it. That's fine. We will not be doing like any sports activities, any screen time, friends. Again, those things that they care about. Like we're not introducing like a bonus or reward, and we're not taking things away. We're just saying this has to be done first. If you can have all those things, you can do all those things, but this does have to be done first. So whenever you want to do it or not do it, it's fine. But then they get to decide, right? It's like, again, allowing those pre-existing motivators to do the heavy lifting. They get to decide when they choose to make it a priority because they care enough about having those other things too. So with resistance, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. I would say first and foremost, get curious, team up with your kid, show them, hey, I know this feels hard. It's actually not that bad. Let's do it together. I'll notice, like, if we're resetting a bedroom, like, I'll notice everything on the floor. Why don't you see what you can notice? Can you notice things that are hung over the chairs or whatever? And like, let's just do it together. And then after, doing that for a certain amount of time, they pretty quickly realize, like, oh, this isn't either like a fight worth having, and two, I'm totally capable, because that's what we want kids to understand. We want them to understand they're capable and to build that resilience. And if they need to kind of like arm in arm, like, hey, come on, teamwork, let's do this together real quick for a little bit as they're learning, then that's great. Just like, again, like we're teaching them to tie their shoes. If they're fumbling with the laces, it's like, hey, I got you.
Yeah.
You hold this one, I'll hold this one. We'll tie it together and then we're done. And that's how we just continue to practice.
Yeah. And you say on your Instagram that we shouldn't have to micromanage, even if our kids are, I love this expression, neurospicy. So I was like, what? Isn't that sort of the definition of neuroatypical kids? You do have to kind of help them step by step by step. But you're saying that you just do that at the beginning and then they should be able to do it on their own?
Yeah. I mean, my kids have made huge progress. And what's cool is that I have so many people telling me this is the first time that something has worked for my kid who is neurospicy. And it's working like sustainably. It's not just like a one trick pony where it's like, oh, that was fun and worked for like 2 seconds, which is often the case with neurodivergent kids. Is that kind of like the quote unquote magic wears off and then you have to resort to something else again and again. It's like you're constantly trying to reinvent the wheel for them. But because the structure is what it is and it's sustainable and simple, and there is that built-in flexibility. So we're giving them support. Again, we're not just saying, here, you've never tied your shoes before, go do it and don't make me micromanage anything. You know what I mean? It's worth saying, here's the visual cues that are going to help you. What are some, and also saying, like, what are some other ways that you can remind yourself? Like, I asked that to my daughter the other day. I was like, hey, I don't want to have to be in charge of like carrying in my mind that mental note that I need to remind you about. I can't remember what it was, like when she needed to start doing her homework. I was like, what do you think you could do to remind yourself? And just kind of, again, like put the ball back in her court lovingly and gently. And she kind of got this little like smirk on her face. And she turned to the Alexa and said, Alexa, set a reminder for me to start my homework in 1 hour or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So it's giving them the opportunity to creatively problem solve and find things that work for them and their unique brain, because you are there supporting them and teaching them how.
Yeah. Sam, I got to tell you, as I'm having this conversation, I'm sort of getting these waves of emotion of like, oh my God, that would be so nice to not have to manage that. I'm sure you get that reaction all the time.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, like the biggest words that people say again and again, game changing, life changing. Where was this 20 years ago? Where, and what's really, really cool too, maybe not more, but I would say equally as amazing of a feeling as like, oh my hell, like things are just off my plate now. Things that that I constantly was tracking in my mind, I don't have to track and they're still getting done. As amazing of a feeling as that is, it's really, really cool to like see your kid who previously like trying to get any type of chore done was like Armageddon, confidently stride up to you and say, I took care of the laundry pile in my room. I emptied the garbage and wiped down the countertop.
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like a pipe dream. It sounds like a fantasy, but I promise you the amount of people, like there's literally not a day that goes by where I don't have busy moms who are previously exhausted doing everything for everyone 24/7, all the micromanaging, all the assigning, all the overseeing, everything, telling me this is working. This is what my kid did. And then they did this, or we were going on a vacation and they packed themselves and their little brother, and they labeled things, or, the ripple effects are really, really amazing because kids are feeling empowered. They're feeling capable, and they're being given the opportunity to step up in really like important ways.
Can you think of any specific story that really touched you?
Oh my gosh, so many stories. Let's see. I really, really love stories of kids, of the like ripple effect that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one mom recently say, it's not uncommon now for my son to come home with like a little like written up slip, like award thing of like, he did a really good job noticing things that needed to be cleaned up, like all the sports equipment after recess.
Right.
And he did it on his own, unprompted. And the fact that my boy in particular is, yes, doing these things in our home, but also going out into the world and doing these things on his own, that it's generalized out past the walls of our home, is so powerful. Similarly, I had a woman, and she said, I just have to tell you this, I like still can't believe it. Daughter was in her like high school art class, maybe it was middle school, I can't remember. They were having a really, really hard time keeping the art room clean. When you imagine all the different,
for sure,
stuff that's involved in a classroom art room. So they had like a little classroom meeting about it, and everyone got to, props to the teacher, this is amazing. Everyone got to throw out different ideas of how they think that they should manage the work of cleaning up all the art supplies.
Wow.
And her daughter talked about what notice and do meant and suggested it. And then they all voted. Everyone voted for notice and do. And she said her daughter's teacher emailed her and said, I just have to tell you, this room has never been more clean. And it has never been easier for it to be clean before, because these kids are so empowered. So I would say those kind of stories are my very, very favorite, when it moves past just the household task and starts having this really, really powerful ripple effect.
Oh, that's so cool. Sam, if there is a woman who's listening right now and she feels like she is just fucking drowning, what would be the first life raft that you would throw at her?
I would say grab my free guide. Honestly, grab my free guide. You are not meant to carry it all. And I would also say, like, I believe you. I believe you. Of course you feel exhausted. Of course you feel burned out. Of course you're shoving down, constantly bubbling up resentment. It is not your fault. There is a better way, and you have the chance to change things, not only for yourself now, but for your kids too. And it's going to happen in a simpler, quicker way than you ever thought possible. So just like freaking get the free guide, get started on the big 3 and the one notice and do of their choosing. And then just watch it happen, because it will happen. And it may take time, but for the most part, I would say most women, including myself, are surprised at how quick things change. Because even just the small things, when you're drowning, even just the small things feel like the hugest breath of fresh air. And those small things start compounding on themselves again and again and again. And all of a sudden, it's like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, like we have made so much progress, and I am like breaking this cycle for my kids, and they're not going to experience this. They're going to experience something totally different, which is a really, really beautiful thing.
Right. Because it's about more than who's folding the laundry. It's about stopping this generational pattern of invisible labor that women have been doing for centuries. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sam, first of all, I want you to tell us all the places where people can see you and keep in touch with your work and what you're doing. But I'm also curious, like, what's next for you? Are you going to write a book? Are you going to do a Netflix series? I want you to do all of that, by the way, all of it.
So they can find me at on Instagram at Sam Kelly _world. The link in my bio is where you can get the free guide. And then once you get the free guide, you'll be on my email list. And every week I send out helpful tips and encouraging antidotes and different strategies that they can try that are very, very realistic, very practical, very easy. So I would say do that 100%. I am also working on a book. So just like 2 weeks ago, I signed a book deal, which is super exciting. Thank you. That will be like 2 years down the road though, because it's
for
such
sure.
a huge process. So that is definitely in the works though.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. Well, dude, when that happens, I know what it's like to try and sell a book, and you need a lot of pre-sales. So I'm going to get you back on the show because I feel like I could talk to you forever. And I'm going to report to you all my progress when we next talk.
I love that. Please keep me posted.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Wow. That conversation affected me so much more than I thought it would. And of course, this idea of notice and do, it extends like way beyond parenting and towards any situation where you are a leader and you're delegating tasks. Instead, delegate the noticing and the doing of it. I love the simplicity of it. And one of my other favorite moments was her speech where she suggested what I should say to my teenage sons. And she made the analogy of the basketball team where one person's trying to do all the things and then just going to get totally burnt out. The way she painted that picture made it so clear and so obvious that this is a problem that needs fixing. And finally, I loved it when she kind of gave me a little bit of a really subtle, really gentle reprimand, saying that if you are the partner with lower standards and you just kind of don't really care, it's because you have the privilege of not caring. That really hit home for me. But I'm wondering what hit home for you. So leave a review and let me know. And also, really important, dude, if you have a mom in your life, and I know you do, who could use some more support around the house, send it to her. Send this interview to her. Send this interview to the person who should be supporting her a little bit more. Send this interview to your mom and to your fucking member of parliament, because the more people who know about this, the more housework is distributed equitably, the more we can all live our fucking lives. Does that sound good? Sounds good to me. Until next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.